did a review on using properties of multiplication. On top, we talked about the multiplication of 0. You're writing all of this in your notebook right now, right? Okay, great. So we talked about the multiplication property of 0, which you said anytime you multiply a number by 0, it's always going to be 0. Whenever you multiply a number by 1, it's always going to be that number. And that's called the multiplication property of 1. The cumulative property of multiplication, like you said, basically says it doesn't matter what order you put your factors in, you're always going to get the same product. The commutative property of multiplication says changing the order of two factors does not change their product. You agree with that, right? Then we talked about the associative property of multiplication. And this property states that when you multiply numbers, the grouping of the numbers can be changed in any order you like without changing the product. And we gave an example of that. We said if we have these two sets of numbers, it didn't matter what order we put them in, we would get the same answer. So if I said 5 times 3 times 2, that's our timer. Let me go ahead and put about 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes on our timer. Oh, I have a little dot to dot mark there from Sanaya. Okay, back to this. So 5 times 3 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30. Let's change the order. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. Same answer. Let's say we had some parentheses around them. If we had parentheses around them, we know through PEMDAS, order of operations, we would do what's in the parentheses first. So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. Let's go to this one and put parentheses around it. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 times 3 is 30. As you can see, with or without parentheses, we still got the same answer. And they all gave us 30. So that's the associative property of multiplication. Again, which states it doesn't matter the order in which you group the numbers, the product will not change. Now, before we do that, the associative property, which we just did. Excuse me. Okay. So now let's talk about today's lesson. The distributive property of multiplication, which basically says multiplication distributes over addition. So with the properties that we just talked about, multiplication property of 0 and of 1, the commutative property, the associative property of multiplication, with these properties, along with the distributive property, we can find the product of any whole number. Again, the distributive property says that multiplication distributes over addition. And let's look at the example here on the board that we just talked about. If I give you the example, it basically says we are distributing this 3 over addition. We are distributing the 3 to our 2 and distributing our 3 to our 5. But where does the multiplication come in here? As we learned before, when you you have to multiply when you see a dot. Normally a dot is used in algebra and above or pre-algebra and above. A dot means to multiply. Like this, a dot means to multiply. If you have an X between two numbers means to multiply. And also parentheses. Anytime you have a variable or a number next to a parentheses, it means to multiply. Let me write that down as an example so you know, you can visually see what I'm talking about. If you see 3 times x, that's the same as 3 times x. 3 dot x is 3 times x. If you see 3 times x, same thing. We're multiplying 3 by x. If you see 3 parentheses x, the same thing. We're multiplying 3 by x. All of that means multiplication. And that's where we get the multiplication distributing over the addition. So let's see what that looks like. So we distributed the 3 to the 2. That's how we got 3 times 2. We bring down our sign. We're going to distribute the 3 to the 5. That's how we got 3 times 5. So 3 times 2 is 6. Bring down our sign. 3 times 5 is 15 equals 21. Now, when I ask you to solve a problem like this using the distributive property, this is how I want you to do it. Now, if I give you the same problem and I say, please use PEMDAS, you would do it this way. Remember what we talked about with PEMDAS? Parentheses first, parentheses brackets first, right? So what's in the parentheses? We have the 2 plus, very good, the 2 plus the 5, which equals 7. Now we bring down our entire problem. We bring down our 3, and that gives us 3 times 7. Another way I could have written this, if I were to bring down my parentheses, would have been 3 times 7, right? Either way means the same thing, 21. So this tells you, if I give you a problem and I say use the distributive property, solve it that way, and we can double check using PEMDAS. If I say solve it using PEMDAS, you can double check by using the distributive property. Make sense? Very good. Now we're going to utilize the same concept of the distributive property, and we are going to go ahead and use it via a algebraic problem using variables. So we talked about this and you got the correct answer. So they didn't tell me is distributing the 3 to the y and the 3 to the 5. So 3 times y, and bring down our sign, the addition sign. And then we're distributing the 3 to the 5. 3 times 5. So 3 times y is 3y. Remember, don't let the variable scare you, because when you have a dot between two numbers, integers, or between a variable, all it means is to multiply. So 3y plus, bring down our sign, 3 times 5 is 15. So this is the simplest way that we can solve this problem. Now, what about if I tell you y equals 2? If I say y equals 2, I want you to solve this using PEMDAS and then double check it using distributive property. Can you help me with that? How would I solve that using PEMDAS? Let me rewrite the problem. 3y plus 5, and we know y equals 2. So what would I do using PEMDAS? I want you to use PEMDAS, and this one you're going to use distributive property. What would I do with PEMDAS? Y equals 2. So I would do what? Very good, but very good. So I would have y is 2 plus 5, and I would do what? Rewrite my entire problem, right? Okay, what's next?
And then 2 plus 5 is 7.
2 plus 5 is 7, and very good.
And then that equals 21.
Excellent job. Now, if I say, I want you to double check that problem for me using the distributive property, how would I solve that? Use the distributive property. Let's go ahead and rewrite our problem. What would I do using the distributive property?
Y still equals 2.
Yep, y still equals 2. So you want to go ahead and just replace your y now? We can do that. Very good. Okay.
So put 3 times 2.
Very good. 3 times 2. Very good. plus, and we distributed the 3 to the 5. Very good. 3 times 5. And then keep going. What do I do next? 3 times 2. 6 plus 3. 3 times 5 is 15. Very good. And then that equals, very good. Excellent job. Good work. Any questions on the distributive property? Did you write all of this on the board for me? Not on the board. In your notebook?
I didn't get distributive because you didn't say
Oh.
until you were done.
Oh.
Everything else, yeah.
Okay, so go ahead and finish the board and also do the example on the other board. And then we'll move on to the next lesson.